live.
Okay. Good afternoon. Today is May 22nd, 2023, and this is a meeting of the Education Committee.
And let me just add, the meeting is conducted in accordance with the requirements of New York State Open Meetings Law, which is Article 6 of the Public Officers Law. And in addition, we will have one Commissioner Whittingham is participating pursuant to POL Section 103-A and the Commission's corresponding rules for participation remotely in extraordinary circumstances.
Present among the commissioners are Commissioner Gruenweger, myself, Claudia Edwards, and on WebEx is Commissioner Kaylin Whittingham. Sorry.
And Chair Davey, ex officio member of the committee, will be joining momentarily in person.
And so you have the agenda before you. And I'd like to begin with discussing our proposed charter, goals and objectives for the Education Committee. As you know, at our last meeting, at our organizing meeting, we were delegating the responsibility to come back to the full committee with a proposed charter for our committee, goals and objectives that we propose to achieve. And we will be presenting it for approval. We're not bound to do that by tomorrow's meeting, so don't feel pressed to approve it. The final decision could be delayed until the June meeting. But our goal for today is to at least examine it enough to report out the progress we've made to the full commission on tomorrow. So you received the proposed charter in advance of this meeting. I won't take the time to read it. Everyone should have a copy of it, including the public. Am I correct?
Yes, I believe everything was posted.
Before I go into the charter, Commissioner to Executive Director, do you have any comments, remarks you'd like to make before we begin?
Yeah, well, let me just say that, just to point out that the education unit within the agency is a shared unit. So it is shared between the ethics division, which has a number of responsibilities, including providing ethics training for the entire executive workforce now under the Ethics Commission Reform Act of 2022. It's a substantial responsibility that falls on the ethics group. In addition to the education unit also provides and meets the statutory requirements under both the Lobbying Act and Section 94 of the Executive Law to provide ethics training both to registered lobbyists as well as to lobbying clients. That too is a requirement that's new under ECRA 2022. So it's a unit that has those shared responsibilities and falls within the purview of both the lobbying division on the one hand and the ethics division.
Should make sure that that's addressed in our mission statement. All right, any comments about the proposed charter?
I have one, a general comment. In the second paragraph after the bullet, where we talk about what we're committed the unit to doing and how the product of the work product of the unit is delivered. You talk about it being designed and executed in a way in the trust and respect of the public and the like. One thing I found that was missing from this was that those who are trained are the state workforce. And I think knowing that there's a regular, I would argue frequent training requirement, that I think it's incumbent that we ensure that the training is relevant. I think, and I say this somewhat as a longtime former state employee who sat through ethics training as well as a whole host of other trainings time and time again. There was a tendency, I thought, sometimes to be told things, particularly as a long-term employee, that I'd heard many, many, many times before. And I think the more customized and audience specific we can make the training, understanding that we have a massive audience, I think should be part of our goal. And again, so I would just find a way to write in that our training is designed to be relevant to the workers who are being trained.
Okay, so that's not part of the charter. You want to be part of the goal.
Well,
The charter,
we've got it in the charter where we say we're committed to ensure colleagues' education and training unit is designed and executed in a way that earns the trust and respect of the public and legislature. That paragraph, I would work in that it's designed and executed to be relevant to the workforce we're training. Telling the people that we're training what they need to know, not what we want to tell them. I think that's a common thing I've seen with training. Trainers often tell their audience what they know as opposed to what the audience, their training needs to
Yeah,
know.
I mean, just in response to that, I don't disagree with anything you've said. I mean, that clearly, and you'll see it when Marlena and Megan do their presentation on their slides. On the one hand, the statute does command that every other year, both initially and then every second year thereafter, every member of the executive workforce receive comprehensive ethics training. That's in the judgment of the commission. Recognize that most of the actual training is conducted at the agency level by ethics officers. One of the responsibilities, one of the missions of the commission and of the training group is to train trainers to deliver that ethics training. There is adapted training because of this particularly because of the broad requirement. Previously, under prior iterations of Section 94 of the executive law, training was targeted to those individuals who were policymakers or threshold filers. So it was individuals who were at certain levels of supervision or responsibility. Now we have a much broader workforce, and adaptations are being made, have been made in the training, and there are proposals which we'll discuss for levels of decision-making or discretion, if you will, at the agency level. I kind of think maybe we want to, before we get too specific in the language, look at what staff is proposing as, and then, work that into, if you will, into the mission statement.
go ahead, Caitlin.
Okay, yes, thank you. I wanted to add a revision to that same section. I think our ultimate goal is indeed to earn the trust and respect of the public and the legislative and executive branch as an independent agency. However, as it relates to the education unit, I think we should be designing and executing in a way that informs, make aware, and foster compliance with the rules of ethics and lobbying. I think that's what it should state, even though overall the agency as a whole has this ultimate goal of earning the public trust as it relates to education and what our goals should be. And our charter, it should be to inform, it should be to make aware of these rules, and in essence, foster compliance with the rules of ethics and lobbying in government.
But you're saying we should amend to include it informs, make aware, and fosters compliance?
Yes, with the rules of ethics and lobbying, because I think that's what educating the employees. That should be the goal of it.
Thank you. That makes sense to me. Do you feel the same?
I agree.
Now let's get back to, do you mind if I call you by your first name?
I don't mind at all.
Commissioner Nancy.
Oh, well, no, if you're gonna call me Nancy, just call me Nancy.
Okay. In regards to the word relevant, I'm just wondering whether or not that's too specific for the mission statement. But somehow we weave it in further down, either under the goals or the objectives, because I kind of agree with, you know, I call you Sandy.
Yes.
Sandy.
Yes, absolutely.
I agree with Sandy that it's something that we understand and it's also an issue that's come up under several of the testimonial statements that came about at the public hearing.
I think the point Sandy just made a minute ago about, you were calling it adaptive training. You know,
Yes.
meaning it's modified for the particular audience, that, or their level of responsibility, decision-making, discretion, and the like. That's what I was talking about.
And relevant to the work that they
That's
do,
right.
so that it has real life applicability.
So you want to put the word adaptive in the charter?
Well, as Sandy just said a minute ago, I think after we hear the discussion of what staff have crafted already, that might help us find the right word, the word that they've been using. And if adaptive is it, that'd be fine. I might want to avoid that word only because you often hear it in the connotation of administering programs to persons with disabilities, you know, adaptive technology and the like. So that just might be a word that has multiple meanings, but I'm sure we can find the
We'll
right
find a
word.
word.
I wasn't using it in a technical sense, and I'm sure Marlena and Megan can articulate it much better than I possibly could.
I think we all agree, just the question, what do we need to place it in one of these major pieces and how we will do that? Because it is an issue that's come up several times among the public with regard to having the flexibility to make it more relevant to their particular constituent. We will address that. I'm just not sure whether or not we address it at the charter level. Do you want to add to that, Caitlin?
No comment there. I'll just wait. Maybe what we want to do is have the presentation, move up the presentation if there's something there that we should be incorporating, either in the goals or the charter, if that's the thought.
Thank you. Any other comments about the charter? So aside from the two comments that were made, we are all on the same page with regard to being relevant, with the exception of our taking a second look at it after we see the presentation from staff. Yes, Caitlin.
And then the second bullet, it's probably just about rewording it. Designed for education training. And I don't know if, or for training in ethics and lobbying, then education training, that's probably just wording. But I know we have best in class in quotation mark. Do we want that there, or do we want to come up with something more specific as to what exactly we're aiming for?
Could you explain further?
You know, we want to be one of the best, want to be one of the best in the class. What does that mean? And I think your question to me is to explain, is my point exactly. When someone reads this, do they understand it? Do they understand what we're trying to accomplish? Can we?
I'm sorry.
Now, I was just wondering if we can, set a goal, have a more specific goal that's outlined here. And it doesn't need to be a paragraph. It may be another sentence or two where we're specifying exactly what we hope to accomplish. And then if we still want to use the word best in the class, we can put it at the end. But here, as it is, I'm not quite sure what our goal is.
Okay, again, for me, the charter is not a goal. The charter is a broad statement with regard to how we envision ourselves operating.
Yeah, mission, right? Well, the
I see that.
overall.
I see that more in the vision, not the mission, the vision, from my perspective. The goal is closer to the mission with regard to what we want to achieve. Best in class, when I use a term, I want to make sure that our program is regarded and respected by professionals in our field as one that sits among or above, you know, the most, the most, the most effective and most efficient. How that is being defined, I have that question too, and I don't think that it should be answered in this document. But one of the questions I have is, how do we determine that this existing program that we have is considered the best in its class? Is it based by some recognition it gets from a business association? Do we compare it to other, how do you define success? Do you look to other commissions to see the extent to which the public regards their work or how they measure success? I think that's something for debate. I think that we would look to staff to help us figure that out. But to put the point out in the commission that our goal is to get there. How we get there, I think, is up for discussion.
Absolutely. I think our charter should be broad, but it should not be so broad that we don't understand it. And I personally do not understand it here. So when we see it, we don't want to list 10 things, but if we list one or two, because this statement of best in the class, it's something we use daily without knowing. It's like, who's going to judge that? So in that respect, I would say we need a little more specific. I just don't understand it.
What terminology would you need to understand it?
I mean, that's something we'd have to think through. I don't, like, for example, when we mention in meetings about having where they either have a code or they have to sign something. I don't know right now, but I'm just saying this is a little too broad. We can think about it. As you said, it doesn't need to be approved today or tomorrow. We can think about it and refine it, and it could be approved at either tomorrow meeting, we can think more, or at the other meeting.
Along those lines, let me suggest that staff will research, what sort of classificatory scheme or ratings there are.
Right.
This is an enormously broad requirement that the commission is now required to satisfy. What the comparators there are, in terms of magnitude, the undertaking, we've talked about metrics and that sort of thing. So this is new territory in many respects, and this is an aspirational goal.
Right.
Being considered in that category, but who would be the considerer, and what factors they would be taking into account beyond the basic extension of providing training to the volume of individuals we need to provide training to. It's something we'll take a closer look at. We'll come back with some recommendation.
At the last meeting we had with communications, I have it somewhere in my notes. Michael Cardozo mentioned an organization, which I think is
CLC.
yes, CLC, that did a survey of other ethics councils, commissions across the country. I think he identified 3 of them. Might be a place to start.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. A number of jurisdictions that are potentially comparable in some respects, in terms of their legal structure and the breadth of their requirements.
And you gave me the name of an association that we're affiliated with too.
Yes.
That we can look there too.
Of state ethics commissions, yes. Yeah, and we have looked at those. I don't think we're at the point where we've gotten to the point where we can narrow it down to something to satisfy that. But this is the aspiration to be considered among best in class.
Okay, so we'll look at that further.
But we'll see if we can refine it and come up with something more specific.
Nancy, you were trying to get a word.
I just had a question for you, Cindy. Do you know, do any other states have a requirement that their entire executive branch workforce be trained? Or is that unique to New York?
Nancy, or Commissioner Grunwagon, this is Megan, Deputy Director of Education. I've looked at this quite a few times, at looking at what other ethics commissions across the U.S. require. We, as far as I can tell, are the only state that requires live ethics training of the entire state workforce, whereas some other states might have hybrid, where they may say, yes, we have to, everyone has to take it, but they have the option of doing online or live. We are the only state, like I said, that I can find that is requiring now everyone to do it live. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Is that a good thing? Is that a good thing?
The live training?
Yeah. The requirement, and we being the only one in the country, is that appropriate? Do you feel comfortable with that, or what does that say?
We have said about executing that. I mean, I think, and I'm look to Megan and to Marlena on their insights into it. New York's ethics training scheme for a number of years, and this goes back to 2014, 2015, when it was first put in place. It's called live training. That was mandated in the statute. And that's a legislative judgment that was made. The current statute, and my explanation was only partial before, is that every other year there'd be live training. And in the intervening years, there's online, which is considered to be a refresher course. So the legislature has endorsed both forms of training, in fact, live and online. And I don't want to get too far ahead of their statutory requirement or my specific knowledge in the field. It takes a certain amount of expertise to make this judgment. But I think the concept of live was to incorporate the idea of interaction. And so individuals were being trained were not just passively receiving information, but they were having the opportunity to ask questions and to get clarification in a live setting. That has other implications too, because it potentially limits the number of individuals you can have in a class. So traditionally, this agency, in executing the much smaller prior agency, executing the mandate, put a cap on class size. 60, 70 is kind of the limit. Maybe in live sessions it would go larger than that, but not much because they wanted that kind of interaction. But whether that's practical any longer, something that we're going to have to assess.
Right. I was thinking the same
But
thing.
that's a legislative judgment at this point. We don't have to. We can deliver it.
We were able to do
We
it.
could deliver it online, but it has to be live and interactive every other year.
That is a big challenge. Did I answer your question, Nancy? Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, I should ask if Marlena or Megan want to add anything at this point, or when they do their slides, they can get into more of that.
And so if there are no other comments, do you have any comments to make on the charter at all?
I don't. I heard, so I was listening in as I was trying to park. So I did hear the conversation back and forth about specificity as opposed to vision and direction. And I agree with you, Chair, that vision and direction should be more of the charter than about specificity. Other than that, that's it.
Any comments? Could we move on to the goals of the committee? I thought to include that because there was question among commissioners at our organizing meeting with regard to our role and distinguishing it from the role of staff so that we don't overstep our bounds. I thought to have a section that speaks specifically to what we envision ourselves doing. Could we have some comments on that?
Just a quick question here. Do we envision incorporating the request that commissioners attend some of these trainings in person as one of the goals?
I would put that down under objectives.
I'm sorry?
Put that on the next page as an objective that we want to achieve. It says objectives for years 1 to 3.
Yes, where is it? I'm sorry if I missed it.
It's not included, but what I'm saying is, yes, I would agree, but I would put that under objectives. What do you think, Nancy?
Well, I guess we're jumping ahead to the suggestion that members attend training. I think the idea of commissioners being familiar with what the training actually looks like and having sat through it almost as a participant, I think is very valuable. But I think we need to think through the logistics of how to do that. But if it's just to make sure that members are personally familiar with the substance of the training, that's a given. But and it's not just limited to members of this committee. I think every member of the commission should know how
We operate.
Yes, and to see what the workforce that we're training is seeing.
But the question Kane is asking should be part of our goal.
Let me just say that every commissioner will be receiving training as part of the execution of the training requirement. So you will be receiving that training.
Again, we want to be as broad as we can with our definitions. I'm not sure whether or not discussing, well, I am sure. I don't think it should be part of our goal, but essentially part of what we want to achieve, that we said, that commissioners will attend 5% of the training. So
I think, I guess I would be disinclined to include it in this document,
Yeah.
which is limited to the education committee. And think more broadly on behalf of the entire commission. It's an obligation of each commission member, irrespective of what committee you're on, to know the work of the body. And so if
I see what you're saying.
so
But all commissions should be going, not just the education.
oh, yes, or at least have experience. And I don't know, the going or with, participating in a live online something. Yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. I don't think I would set, you're right, but I also don't think I would designate a specific number of trainings to attend. I think it would be more useful for members to see how very different workforces are trained. To see the training that's given to, an FDS filer and with a lot of discretion and responsibility as compared to a clerical worker or a line institutional worker. I think their workplaces are very different. And I think seeing how they're trained about their ethical obligations would be useful.
What about maybe a statement, Caleb? We lost them. We
Sorry, I did not hear you.
lost.
It's just this.
I was thinking, Caleb, to respond to your thoughts, that maybe we can make a statement with regard to our goal as the Education Committee to ensure or encourage all commission members to participate, in whatever language you want to use, but somehow participate in on-site training.
I liked the language Nancy used, Commissioner Grunwig used initially.
Nancy in this meeting.
Nancy in this
Yeah.
meeting.
Claudia,
Commissioner Nancy.
no, we said that I rejected.
Okay, all right, so, that Nancy originally suggested, members of the commission, that's all members, are familiar with the substance of the training for New York State employees. And then I would add a second one, and that is all members of the commission complete our required training by the required deadline.
Could you give me that language?
I dictated, he scribed.
Yeah, yeah.
So see, right. Okay, does that work for you, Caitlin?
Can you repeat the second sentence, please?
The second one would be that members of the commission complete all required training by required dates, essentially.
And that would go under objectives, right? Not goals,
Yeah.
under objectives.
Sure.
I think that is fine. I think there's another question that is not answered, not that we have to adopt it, but I personally thought it was a sound suggestion made by the public that we also participate. So not just us completing the training and becoming aware of what it is that, the body's governing, but also being a little more active and possibly actually visiting or being present at some of the training.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe we
Yeah.
could say that. So members of the commission are familiar with the substance of the training of New York employees by attending from time to time training sessions.
That works for me.
Thank you, Caitlin. And then we'll put that under objectives. Maybe you can help us fit that in, Sandy, under the objectives, you pull that together. Okay. Perfect. Anything else under the goal? You had mentioned something prior. You want to talk about that at all? You said, is it about, advocate resources?
Oh. It's just a question, that was back in your opening paragraph. Charter.
Yes, paragraph 2. I think it's sentence 2, paragraph 1. Or it's that first sentence.
Yeah, to
next
ensure
line.
that the executive director has appropriate level of guidance, resources, and policy direction. My only question about an individual committee working towards the adequacy of the resources, I think I see the program is essential to the whole, the training program is essential to the whole of our program. And I think as the executive director and his staff are thinking through meeting the needs, that's for him to be doing and to advocate as, and the chair as well, as they did. There was pieces back when the budget was being enacted that I think the Times picked up a piece, or one of the newspapers picked up a piece on the breadth of the training requirement and what it means. And I think I wouldn't limit that kind of advocacy to one committee. I think, again, that's the whole of the organization. When we talk about the needs of the agency, I don't see the need for, it's almost going to do something I think we want to avoid. It's going to try to almost create siloed approaches as opposed to broader across agency approaches. If you start to think about the agency's resource needs on a program by program basis.
I was thinking in terms of the fact that we're working so closely with the executive director in this particular area, as other committees are working with the executive director in their area, is that we have our pulse on the needs of the agency. So let's just, I'm giving this as an example, but Nancy told me how it's an inappropriate example, because it can't be done. But let's just say, it takes X dollars to create an exemplary communications vehicle through IT. And we learned from one of the agencies that this particular IT that the state does not provide is exemplary, is what we want, which we aspire to acquire. It's going to cost $500,000 more. We would get that information from the executive director in committee, and we would be advocating for the executive director that we support the executive director's lobbying, or whatever word we use, the legislature, to get the increase of that amount, or the chair of that amount. So it's not separate, going off on our own tangent lobbying, but to keep our ears to the ground with regard to the real needs of the education committee, and be supportive of that as we advance it to committee, to the full commission, and as the full commission through the executive director or the chair advances to the legislature. That's how I was thinking about it.
Where's the fault lines?
No, what we were talking about before was that the conversation Claudia and I had before we began was more about who's advocating to whom. And if it's clear after we talked about it that this is just members of this committee advocating to other members of the commission and directly to the executive director, as opposed to how I originally read it as suggesting that somehow we're going on our own. And
As a committee.
as a committee, which I think the committees don't, in my view, don't go outside
Absolutely not.
the commission. So that just needs to be understood.
So this needs to be wordsmith to deal with that. And if so, can you kind of work on that, get back to me? Sure. Okay. Kayla, you okay?
I'm fine. I will wait for the revised version.
Objectives for year 1 to 3. I'm going to toss that over to you, Sandy, since you really played a strong role pulling that together.
So which ones are?
Objectives for the years 1 to 3. And that might be something you want to wait until the presentation, but you know how you feel about that.
I think we should do the presentation first, because the presentation will clarify
Okay.
each of these issues and what staff's recommendation.
Let's just hold this off until we see the presentation. Okay. Are there any other thoughts or comments regarding well, first of all, I'd like to, from what I'm hearing, we're going to just report out to the commission tomorrow, at tomorrow's meeting, but we won't finalize, our goal is not to finalize this until the June meeting. Are we all in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So we're going to make the updates of the changes that you've proposed, recirculate this document. I'll give an update tomorrow at the meeting without making the changes. And work with our goal to asking for full approval at the June meeting.
You've shared the draft agenda with the other members, correct?
Well, we requested that it be, did it go out to the other members?
I don't think so. No.
It should, right? Because what we tried to do is we want to be able to invite any commissioner who wants to attend our meetings. And they should be, I think the minutes even say we should give them a copy of our package so they can
I think we
respond to
voted
it.
on that.
All right, we'll get it out.
And it's the simple reason that if you choose to comment and you want to be heard, better to be heard sooner rather than
Right.
at a meeting, which just sends us back.
All right, we'll take care of that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so can we now move on to the questions that were assigned to us that came out of the public hearing on March 29th. what I had asked Sandy to do is to come up with a list of questions. I wanted us to be on the same page with regard to the list of questions which were assigned to us. We didn't quite get there. And I'll talk more on that tomorrow in terms of thinking about how we want to deal with our next public hearing. But we did the best we could. So what you have in front of you are questions. I went through all of the testimonies that I had, and admittedly, I did not have all of them. I identified the questions that I thought was assigned to us for questions that the chair directly assigned to us at our debriefing session. Sandy came up with the last page of this document. Sandy came up with staff's distillation of the training related comments. And I will admit, and reading the minutes for tomorrow's meeting, there were still some questions. There were one or two important questions that I'm not sure we addressed in either section. So again, I want to talk about that at the meeting tomorrow, but we want to at least, we know at least these are some of the questions that were asked. I don't think we can come up with solutions for tomorrow, but I do want to begin having a discussion with regard to how we want to have input with staff so that when they come up with a proposal for how it could be addressed, that we're all on the same page. So we want to just start with the questions I've outlined, or we had thought Michael's going to be here. Do you want to take the lead on this?
Sure.
And remember, I wanted to, not that what bothers me, but when we break it down or when we synthesize the information like the staff has done, for me, it doesn't give justice to the actual testimony that comes from each individual who took their time to write it. And so I don't want to lose sight of what the pure question is, at least at the committee level. And then once we are very clear on what the questions are, then I don't mind the consolidation. But for me, the essence of the meeting gets lost in this compilation. So I want to be able to publicly say, oh, that's the question I asked. I see how it's being addressed. Do you understand the point I'm making?
I'll go through the compilation that.
And then how it ties back into the questions that we've defined for ourselves. That's what I want to see. In other words, if you told me the bullet one, what question did that come from?
The first one was from SA. That was from the organization that proposed that there be a mechanism, as there is in other professions, for professional organizations, membership organizations and the like, essentially to be certified providers of that training. And they took it a step further. They would, at least as I understood the proposal from them, they would also be providing the certification at some sort of gross rate. Then the commission would enter that into the database. That goes beyond, we use the example of continuing legal education providers, where attorneys can go to, have to be certified sources. In fact, for some purposes, our agency can be a certified provider of expertise, of legal education. But typically, you provide a completion certificate to the individual, and then they provide it to the Office of Court Administration, or wherever they're taking it for certification purposes. That is not something, to my knowledge, historically, the training requirement for ethics only goes back to 2014, 2015. I think is the time, give or take. So it's been handled by the agency. The statute calls for the agency to design the training and oversee its administration. So we train trainers at the agency level to deliver the training. So it's not as if we're doing it all ourselves. In fact, the proposal from SA with respect to the lobbying training, we think are method of delivering the training is pretty good.
But they have a lot of concerns about once they have to enter the government database and the problems it causes. Are you telling me from a legislative perspective, we could not allow them to and manage their own ethics programs as they propose?
Well, I mean, that's a legal question we'd have to look at, whether the mandate to the commission in section 94, subsection 8, would allow us to in effect, offload their responsibility to certify trainers. We would have to develop a capability, I suppose, for training their trainers, certifying them. So we would have to train their trainers. I don't know if it becomes a commercial operation at their end, if they're charging members for it, if we would need someone. I'm just, throwing questions out at this point. On the lobbying side, the lobbying group has put together what I think is, and I think all the commissioners have seen it, and had an opportunity to participate in the lobbying ethics training. You just log on to it. It costs us a couple of bucks. It adds up when you multiply it by the number of trainings that are taking place. And it's not difficult to go through the program. We want to build some checks into the system to ensure that people are going through it. The statute does not require live training. It calls for online training, and we're satisfying that requirement. I don't know. I mean, we really have to look at it administratively, whether the burden on the agency would justify having to go through that process. It may. It's something we would have to look at. The inconvenience that's been referenced, and this is not only from SA, but from another commentator, from a lobbying firm, had to do not with the training requirement, because I don't think, and I would defer to the lobbying group, whether they've received inquiries about difficulty in clicking on the link and sitting through the training. I think it only has to do with the certification requirement and having to go through ny.gov and having to remember your password if you previously created a profile or creating a profile, which you have to do to register your car.
Yeah.
So it's, if you keep track of things, we think it's not a big deal. We will look at, let's see that.
What's not a big deal for us could be a big deal for others. Like I can tell you the big deal I had to go through to do what do you call those things, the financial disclosure
Yes.
statement. That was another day. It's supposed to be easy. It took me a long time.
Well, it's actually the same vehicle. It's
And it is.
NY,
but
it's NY.
I'm just saying that I think that it would go a long way if we could accommodate some of the requests being made by the public or come up with justification for why it cannot. And even having a conversation with these organizations, say, okay, help me understand why this is so difficult. Here's the process. What could we do to make it easier for you? Because there are processes that just doesn't. I mean, we're in a bubble trying to make it work administratively, and I understand the need to do that. It's just so massive. But people outside of that may see it very differently from us. And I'm just suggesting that we have a posture that if agencies come to us, particularly agencies who manage a great deal of ethics trainings and lobbying as a business, they come to us and say, this is a problem. This is why we're having a problem, that we reach out and listen to them and see the extent to which we can fix it, even though we think our process is easy, simple, perfect, whatever you want to say, unless there are legislative reasons that says why we cannot. That's all I'm suggesting.
And it may be because the problem is not the training, it's the having to log into ny.gov and finding your profile. Maybe they can create a business model where it would work for them to get the certifications done at that level. We would provide the training, the individuals will have their training, they would then certify to the organization, which would certify on their behalf. Little leery about that, but we can look at it. We can look at it.
And by agencies, we mean external
Right.
organizations, right?
Private organizations, yeah, so maybe membership.
Who do this as part of their mission.
I think the certification, I kind of agree with Sandy a little bit, the certification, verifying that people have actually done the training. There was an issue with lawyers some years ago around their, what do you guys call that? Continuing
Education.
Yeah, and whether or not people were just turning on the training and walking away from it, and then, so now they have the technology, so you can't do that, right? You can't just turn it on and let the tapes play, and, you go in and clean your house and cook dinner and all those things.
We had that capability. Will we have that
But the
capability?
question is, can we
Yeah.
do whatever the bar associations have done to ensure that people are actually doing it?
Well, Marlena and Megan talked about different methodologies that exist to ensure that, whether it's, and we've done it for some of our trainings that are online. You have to, or you've already been online because you can walk away even if you're taking the course, live online in theory, or put a picture of yourself up, something like that. But there are codes that are generated. So there are lots of methodologies, that are available that we need to build in. Expand the training. But we're just talking about the lobbying side. Well, I don't want to diminish the significance of people. It's 12 or 15,000 individuals. It's not of the magnitude of the other side.
And it could be just the way we're communicating it. I mean, there's a couple of comments that I was reading, particularly in the minutes, where we say we have the solution. Someone complains and we say we have the technology, and here's how we resolve it. But my question kept on being was, well, how come the public doesn't know this? How come the public doesn't understand this? And so what could we do to more effectively communicate how easy this system really is? And again, the way we see it and the way others see it is oftentimes so very different. And that creates hostility between the public and the agency. It's unnecessary when we've done the work. So if we've done it and it's so great and people still don't get it, then we've got to go back and say, okay, so what it is that we can do differently to help them get it.
I was just going to say, so far the solution has been to provide assistance and to provide additional instruction on how to use the system. And it was an unfamiliar system. It was rolled out with a relatively short fuse on it necessarily because on the lobbying side, we rolled out the new educational requirement to coincide with the biennial registration. It was a logical way to do it because we're capturing the individuals who are required to take the training at the same time the training incentive. And, on top of other things that individuals who lobby are doing during the beginning of an registration period, we added this additional requirement. And for some of them, because others were taking care of the register, they had to be registered. They didn't have to register themselves per se. They're part of a larger organization. They didn't necessarily have the familiarity with the system that individual lobbyists or clients who are accustomed to doing it on their own would have. So it was something new. But now that they've gone through it, questions arise. We're expecting it's going to be a much smoother ride in the future. Some will come into the system and will be at a much lower level. 2 years from now, we'll have.
We give instructions to trainers or to organizations with regard to working the process. I mean, do we do like a Zoom session with folks to say this is the process and how it works? So some of them
have done something like that. We should do it.
Yeah, I mean, yes, with respect to the PSQ, the public search query function, they've done that. They're gonna put a recording of that. I would defer to Marlena on whether we have wording up on how to create a profile, but there are plenty of guides online. There's some improvements there.
Well, I think it's important for the commission members to have a little bit of background with respect to the original online ethics for lobbyists training in contrast to what we have right now. So originally for PURA, when we launched the original online ethics, it was actually within the statewide learning management system, which created a host of problems, unfortunately, for our lobbyists back then. And back then, the training was only required to be taken by our lobbyists. Now, in contrast with ECRA, we have both our lobbyists and clients. So the reason why the certification lives within the actual lobbying application is because the training requirement is triggered through the submission of a statement of registration. So we had done a demonstration earlier on. So those players, so your principal lobbyists, your individual lobbyists, those people that are within the firm that are actively engaging in lobbying activity, including your contractual clients and beneficial clients, those are the people that we need to be able to identify with 100% certainty that they are required to take training, which is why the certification lives within the lobbying application. In addition to that, I think we need to be able to also encourage our paper filers to start filing online. And another better way of doing that is also by making sure that the certification remains online. We did streamline accessibility with respect to the training by taking it out of SLMS. So right now, the training is very accessible to anyone. You just go onto our website, you click on a link, and then you're able to kind of click through the training. And we did review a lot of those recommendations that were presented to us, during the public hearing. I think this is something that we also need to be able to discuss in committee with the lobbying committee. To answer some of your questions, we did meet with the New York City Lobbying Bureau, and we did get a demonstration that was helpful to their lobbying application. In addition to that, they have a robust training program, which we are now in the process of developing an actual robust training schedule in-house. We have some great staff members already in-house that are fantastic when it comes to customer service and helping people walk through the application. We're going to expand that by actually having these individuals now do larger training sessions, several times a year to be able to help these individuals not only navigate the application, but in addition to that, streamline the training certification. So we have been very responsive when it comes to these recommendations, that we are receiving. With respect to, ny.gov, my.ny.gov, that's basically a centralized state platform that all state agencies use in order to be able to host their online applications. We did talk to our ITS partners regarding this, and it's really not feasible for us to entertain the ability of taking the entire lobbying application out of that my.ny.gov environment.
Is that where one of the questions came in, that it doesn't appear that we update our database because names of former officials are still in it? Is that?
No, we do update the database, but there are amendments that are made, so we can't take the names out, because then we'd end up with a free-form system, which is what we're trying to avoid. We want to have uniform searchability.
I was wondering, would it make sense to, have you thought about, but it belong, if the database belongs to another agency, that might be difficult, but could you have like an archive section where it mentioned that, I think one of our staff persons mentioned that we have to keep all the names in because some filer may have been.
Right, that's for filing. It's not, so much training requirements or substantive filings. It's going back in. And what we do, it's really for the lobbying. We do have a legacy application and a whole body of things, that is there, but that has to be dealt with separately. It creates a separate body of issues when it comes to making amendments for other reasons, because it's a somewhat primitive system from a security perspective. So there are other things there, but as Marlene has emphasized, we have a very robust help operation that is extremely responsive to requests across the board from not only individuals in the lobbying community, lobbyists and their clients, but also anyone on the outside, whether the press or organizations or whatever, who wants to look at the data. So
I have one question. Marlene mentioned the goal of trying to get the paper filers to become online, electronic. What percentage of the filers are still using paper? I was surprised to hear that there really were.
I don't know.
Is it,
I would defer to, that's really a question for, for Carol and her group.
Yeah, well, but
The same is true on the financial disclosure statement side as well. I think everybody would like to see everything done electronically, so it's right in the system.
right.
I don't know.
It's just, I know there was one comment that said it was the paper filers because they get entering differently. That can cause legs in the.
Well, for those, I mean, it's an issue with respect to training, because if you're doing it on paper, you don't have the familiarity with getting into the system electronically and using your profile and providing the certification. So that's a different beast, and you do certify for training. If I'm not mistaken, Roland, and correct me if I'm wrong, you do need to create the profile if you're a paper filer so that you can certify your training. Is that correct?
So I believe that particular recommendation that you're referring to that resulted from the public hearing was a little bit more complicated than it appears, on paper. I can elaborate a little bit more on that. So with respect to that specific public hearing recommendation, we have a lobbying firm that has X number of clients, but those clients do not want to utilize the online system. In addition to that, it doesn't seem as if they want their actual lobbying firm in order to data enter that information on their behalf within the online system. So, we do. Throughout the demonstration, it was very easy for anyone to see that when it comes to these situations where you may have a change in players, so the CAO may be different, the responsible party may be different, you may want to be able to update your contact information within your organization profile. There are authorized users allowed to be able to do that on behalf of an organization. Unfortunately, if we have clients who only want to utilize, paper in order to file and report to us, they're missing out on that opportunity to be able to be in control of their own data, to be in control of their own, reporting obligations. And instead, what they are doing is they're updating that information within the actual paper filing. And then it's up to one of our filing specialists, primarily help desk, to be able to go into that profile and then update the profile on behalf, of that client. So it's a bit archaic, and honestly, it's not necessary when we do have the tools and mechanisms to allow clients, the flexibility of being able to control and manage their own organization profile information.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have to admit something. I tried to file my FBS online and I gave up because I couldn't figure it out. And so I handed it in the paper. And I didn't want to, I did it with the hospital, so I know how to do online. It's very easy. You just update. You said this last year. Do you want to say it this year? I could not do it through the system. And I finally just said, I'll just do paper.
Well, I want to compliment the staff who I had to call, or my agent, my spousal agent, had to call a couple times, and each time got a prompt, excellent reply. So
I got that too.
and they did great. Oh, well, we got the question. In. Yeah. Well, she got it.
She got it done. I mean, some people, and it's not necessarily the technology. It could be the user, that we're not open to change and inquiry. But that's the public we're dealing with.
It's a generational thing. We're getting there.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not a member of the committee, but I'm just curious, was the challenge, did you feel that, was it more related to the technology or just the obscurity of the wording of the question? Because I found it very challenging to figure out what they were asking sometimes, but.
Well, it wasn't, I didn't bother to ask because I've done this a gazillion times before. It was the technology and the frustration with it. I just gave up and just did the paper. And then when I made phone calls, I couldn't get, there's a number that you call, but no one called me back. No one called me back. You know how I got my information? I called Sandy. That's how I got it. So that was to me. How does the public feel about it? And it's easy as what we say we make it. It's,
Well, I'm glad you've told me that because across the organization.
but everybody doesn't have your phone number. The public doesn't have your phone number. And I'm just saying it was frustrating to me, and I'm a commissioner. And so I'm just saying, what's easy to us isn't always easy and simple to the public. And that causes unnecessary friction between the public and the commission. When I can't get a hold of them, I'm cursing out the commission. You know? Where are these people that I'm paying for? I just think it needs to be, I'm just saying, I appreciate what the staff is doing. I know they work tirelessly. And then, much of the technology is probably already state of the arts. You know, but what we do and how the public receives it are two different things. And I think we need to be sensitive to that.
I have a suggestion. I think it would be useful, and I know it's out of turn, but I think a lot of questions will be answered if we do the hour.
I don't think the questions regarding public hearing is going to be addressed to the presentation. But what I will say is that we cannot answer these questions and complete them today and stay within the time frame we wanted to end this meeting. And so I'm comfortable with, even if I have to work one-on-one with staff to get through these questions and then come back and revisit this next, in time for our June meeting, if that's all right with everyone else. But I just want to get,
Yeah, I mean,
I just want to give you this. I'm just hoping that the staff understands the general, and I don't want to speak for the other commissioners here, but my sense is we want to be able to be as positively responsive as we can to the public's desire to change the system, to better accommodate their needs. And that we make every effort to do that and think out of the box to make it happen. And if it runs up against a legislative requirement, we need to understand that and convey that to the public.
yeah,
And if we can approach the questions that way, then I'm comfortable letting staff take a stab at addressing some of the concerns.
we can be responsive to all the questions. I mean, we will be, and that's the plan. So we have response. Many of them will be answered in the course of the presentation, just because those subject areas are covered very well, I think, in the slides. And then we can come back.
Caitlin.
Taylor?
Yes, thank you. My suggestion was, so we have the questions distilled, we have a list of them. Staff is very familiar with the system, what we are doing right now. We are more aware or becoming more aware of what's happening. I would suggest for the requests that were made, maybe in a sentence or two, there is a pros and a con to us adopting what was suggested. And then we review it, and then we make a decision based on what the staff said, whether or not we believe that, we can move forward in this way. And again, making it more user-friendly or adopting some of the requests of the public. But if we have each of these questions with additional sentence or two, pros, cons, why we suggest yay or nay. I believe at our last meeting, we had a lot of conversations and may have taken the position on some that no, we shouldn't do A, B, C. Now, we should distill that and put it in writing. So we have it, we look at it, we review it, and we decide for the next meeting and say what we would go forward with and what we won't.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think we'll find when you see the presentation, many of these are actually answered.
Does anyone,
Sure, I think that'd be fine.
before we move on, does anyone have any other questions, comments, concerns regarding the document, regarding the goals, objectives, regarding the charter and the goal? We're going to deal with the objectives later.
Come back.
Ava, do you have anything in particular you want to do? Thanks for making the effort to come for our.
Sorry to be here so late, and thanks for inviting me.
Are you good, Caitlin?
I am. Thank you. At the moment.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, so let's move on to Marlena and Megan. And I asked you to, when you make your presentation, you put it in the context of the discussion we just had regarding our charter and our goal.
Maybe muted.
We don't hear you.
Commissioner, this is Megan, before we get into the meat of the actual presentation, we wanted to really quickly talk about two of the points that you were just talking about in those hearing questions. I think that we could potentially just take right off your list, because I will quickly tell you how we already addressed them. One of the comments was from Nicholas Cartagena, I hope I didn't butcher his name, from the Board of Elections. He asked about granting ethics officers greater flexibility in editing the model training to suit the needs of every specific agency, and then also design a streamlined training, basically for non-filers. So actually, during that meeting, I got on email and I emailed him right away during that day, and we were talking about it. I let him know that we already have a streamlined training for non-filers. So we have a couple different versions. We have the full CETC that everybody can take. If you're a crowd, let's say there's 100 people in your audience and you have non-filers and then the FDS filers, everyone could take that one. If you knew that you were going to do just a training of a bunch of folks who are non-filers, we have a shortened one just for them. We have one for unpaid and per diem people. So we already have a bunch of streamlined trainings. And when I told him that, he said, oh yeah, I forgot that you all have that. And that's great to remember. As far as the other point, designing a streamlined, granting ethics officers greater flexibility. What we tell them right now is, please don't take any of our slides out, because we believe this is what's the best comprehensive model of what the laws that we have jurisdiction over. But we definitely tell them, please add in your own agency's policies or whatever scenarios that you might think might be suited to that particular audience. So we tell them, go ahead and add on to it.
Yes, and we do offer it to them in a PowerPoint format, for that specific reason. And, we have many ethics officer forums in which we've also talked to ethics officers and said, if there's specific content that you would like us to be able to include, or if you'd like us to be able to work with you in customizing the slide deck specifically for your agency, that is something that we would do with them one-on-one, and they are aware of that. So, to be clear, we do already provide, some of these situations, for our ethics officers and for our partner agencies.
Perfect. Thank you.
Marlena,
Yes.
you
Hi.
just mentioned that they are aware of that. So what this suggests to me, based on the response just now, is that they have forgotten. In this, could we perhaps just send out an email, because we are also getting information from them about their training and what is happening at their agency. But if we include in the email when we send it out exactly what you said, there are stuff that are streamlined specifically for non-filers, just making it top of mind, because sometimes things, but it's not top of mind. And if someone else goes into that seat, they may not have read it before. They should have, but they may not have. So if we have something that's very general, that's always included in that email, that's remind them of these things that we already have, and that you are also available and willing to help them to customize one to suit their agency specifically. So it's just a reminder, but we put that out there so that they can know that. Because if he's asking for this, he did forget, as Megan said, suggest that he did, and it's just not top of mind. So as we, with our new goal to make sure everybody is trained, do all of this, let us remind them, and let us tell them that you are ready, willing, and available to work with them to customize it for their agency.
Agreed. And I appreciate that feedback, and that's something that, me and Megan have been working on. We're in the process of developing, a comprehensive guidance document right now that, details to ethics officers exactly what our expectation is with regards to training, what the timelines are, and, basically what services that, we are willing to be able to provide and help them, meeting this enormous mandate. So, I appreciate that feedback, and that is something that me and Megan have been working on, diligently in order to be able to broadcast, because based off of, our partner agencies' availability, they're not able to attend, let's say, all of our ethics officer forums. We've been doing a great job of expanding the number of ethics officer forums that we've been holding. We've actually been doing like customized sessions. Me and Megan this week will be doing an ethics officer forum specifically tailored to listen to the feedback and to the concerns of our partner agencies that deal with seasonal employees, that deal with temporary employees, and the challenges that they are having right now being able to train those folks, especially those folks, let's say, that may be on the payroll for less than 90 days. So we are ramping up our efforts with respect to, effectuating that two-way communication between us here, between myself and Megan, and between our ethics officers. So that's a great point. I think once we are able to kind of finalize that document, to your point, we want to be able to hold like a massive communication and work with Emily and her team, the communications team, and being able to reach the most amount of people with respect to that guidance.
Thanks, Marlena. I think that's awesome, what you guys are working on, which will be more comprehensive. I would only ask one step further in your email, not in the attached documents, but maybe you have 5 points, no more, because I think one of the other thing that I recall him saying, and I'm not quoting him, but that he wore several hats and he's doing ABC. A lot of us, we have so much to read, and it comes in and you intend to go through it. Top 5 things. Don't forget, we're available to assist you create that. This is available, just 5. And so you can glance it in the body of the email and not just the attached document. I think that could be helpful.
I agree. We're in the process right now of, as a lot of you know, I deal a lot with data in our transparency initiative. So I've been kind of combing through a lot of our lobbying data. And to your point, wherever possible, now we're trying to incorporate like 5 highlights, let's say, in order to be able to kind of engage our reader, to see what the trends are from one year to the other. So, I do love that idea. And that's something that, Megan just jotted down. So we will incorporate that, because we understand we all wear multiple hats, and we want to be able to make the information as easily to digest, to our partner agencies as possible, because the majority of these folks are ethics officers, they are attorneys, they're general counsels, they have massive mandates themselves that they need to be able to effectuate within their own agencies. So, we are empathetic to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think with that, we can move on to presentation.
Sure, just give me 1 second. Please let me know if you're able to see the presentation on your screen.
Looks good.
Okay. So once again, welcome. My name is Marlena. A lot of you know me as the Deputy Director here of Learning Innovation, and I also handle a lot of the data management initiatives and transparency and lobbying data. And with me today is my colleague, Megan Hennigan, who is the Deputy Director of Education, who's been spearheading the education program now for, I'd say, around 8 years now, 8, 9 years? So we will give you a quick overview of the current structure of the training unit. So your leadership team is comprised of our Director of Ethics, Michael Sand, myself and Megan, and 1 training associate and 1 training assistant. I think, by this slide, it's pretty obvious that we are clearly lacking vital resources, when it comes to staffing here. The unit only has 1 training associate responsible for managing the education inbox, training enrollment, course closeout, and gathering statistics for both our monthly and quarterly training staff. And that's all falling right now on just 1 individual. Now, in contrast, our proposed expanded staffing plan allows for 3 training associates on 2 training assistants. So we wanted to be able to give you a quick update as to where things are with regards to our hiring efforts. So myself, Megan, and Michael spent, I want to say, the last 2 weeks during first round interviews for our training associate position. So that would actually be our trainers that would be delivering our ethics-based trainings for us. We have already recommended our second round candidates, and they are actively interviewing with both Sandy and Keith, and we hope to be able to make offers, relatively quickly. Now, once hired, me and Megan have talked about this multiple times. Our immediate goal is to increase the number of training sessions that we offer here at Colig. Right now, because of the lack of staff resources, we're only really able to provide training 2 times a month. And it's been something that Megan and I have discussed at length. And we cannot possibly ask our partner agencies to double and triple their training sessions while we don't do the same. But unfortunately, it's critical for us at this point in time to be able to staff up. We need those trainers so that we can, expand the availability of our own internal training sessions. So I'm just going to give you a high-level comparison, and then Megan's really going to drill it down for you between what the Public Integrity Reform Act of 2011 and the Ethics Commission Reform Act of 2022. Now, PIRA, I call it PIRA 2011. Now, for the first time, mandated ethics training for FCS filers, okay? And FCS filers are those individuals that make above a certain salary threshold, so they're earning, a significant salary, or they're actually in a position of a policy-making position, which means that they're in a position where they can actually influence and make decisions within their agencies. It also mandated ethics training for lobbyists. As I had mentioned earlier, it mandated training for, the responsible parties of those lobbying organizations in addition to their individual lobbyists. Now, in response to this mandate, Jacob at the time established the Train the Trainer program. So initially we had held, I want to say between a 2 to 3 week period, we held multiple sessions twice a day where we actually trained ethics officers and their training designees from partner agencies and taught them how to be able to train the CETC. Now, in contrast, the Ethics Commission Reform Act of 2022 expanded that ethics training requirement now for all state officers and employees. So we're no longer looking at our high-level, FCS salary making or, threshold over filers. It also expanded the lobbying ethics training requirement to both lobbyists and clients. So I ran the figures today to kind of give you an idea with respect to the lobbying client training. So it's over 12,000 lobbyists and clients that are required to take our online training. Now, on the statewide side, we had a significant, massive jump. We went from approximately 30,000 FDS filers to well over 300,000 statewide employees. In addition to that, one of the issues that we have is actually being able to identify the state workforce. I mean, we'll get into that a little bit later, but just to give you a little bit of awareness.
All right, so I'll go through this pretty quickly. And we want to contrast what a huge change the training requirements, what the change has been. So when we were operating under PIRA, we did have this online ethics orientation. It was a purely online training. It was housed in SLMS. And people who were just we're just remembering this was just the FDS filer, so about 30,000 people at that time were required to take it. Part of the issue was not every agency is in SLMS. So we have, I think, at least SUNY and CUNY themselves were constantly calling our unit, how are we supposed to take this training? Eventually, we took it out and put it on our website and did certification. So that is all gone. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we had that. They had to take it within the first 90 days. Then the CETC, the Comprehensive Ethics Training Course, it was mandated in the law to be 2 hours long. They had a specific time requirement with it, and that was to be taken every 3 years. Also, we had the ethics seminar, which was another live training. So you had the chance every 3 years, you had to take live training. You could either take the CETC on and on and on, or you could take the ethics seminar, which was designed to be more of a what's new, what's highlighted. It was a chance to get into more scenarios than just drill through the law. And that was also mandated in the law to be an hour and a half. So we had another time requirement added on to that. Ethics for lobbyists, as Marlena had said, was also housed in SLMS. And it was, I think, believed for every 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we can go now to how it's changed. Under ECRA, we have the CETC, and as you all know, it's now for everybody. And at my last count, because I've been handling the quarterly reports, there's at least 315,000 people in the state workforce that now have to take this live ethics training every other year. Yes.
Sorry, what's the CETC?
Oh,
What's this
the comprehensive ethics training course?
Okay, great, thanks.
I'm sorry. Now, there's no longer a time requirement, which is great because you really, to get to all the main points, I mean, I've been doing it in about an hour, and sometimes an hour, maybe 15 minutes, depending on the questions. It goes much quicker, and that's what's going on with that. Eventually, we will have an ethics refresher, which will be online. We haven't gotten a chance to get to that yet. Also in ECRA, ethics officer training, which we equate to what was the ethics forums that we've been doing. Mm-hmm. This year last year, we've had a couple. We've had one that was purely FDS reminder how to use the FDS system. We had a train the trainer, which we also include in those ethics officer trainings.
And the train the trainer, to Megan's point, was doing the comprehensive ethics training course. So it was an opportunity for not only existing ethics officers to kind of refresh themselves on the training, but it also provided an opportunity for new training designees in order to be able to train the CETC for their own employees in their own agency.
And then the last point of ECRA's new training is the ethics training for lobbyists and clients again. And as you know, I'm not going to spend much time on this at all, but it launched, as you all know, in January, and it's online training developed by CoLig here. We should go to the next. I think we really just covered all of this. We may be able to go on to the next one. I think. Okay. Oh, this is me. All right, so here are just some training-related stats that we wanted you to know. So right now, Marlena is pretty much doing all the tech fun stuff on that side of education, and it's just me and my training assistant, Brianna. And we figured that we get at least 600 to 700 education inquiries a month, emails, phone calls. I mean, that could be a low count. And so we get a lot of questions, and we're communicating back and forth with people every day. And we have 385 or so agencies that we give guidance to. So this is the latest figure, 25,433 employees that we've gotten these statistics for the quarterly report. That's from January to March. So it's getting much better. I actually just looked at the April figures, which I'm still getting in from agencies. It's about 11,500 just for April. So when you take those first 4 months of 2023, you're looking at about, 37,000 employees that are being trained. It's gone up substantially. Now, the issue we have here, though, is from the quarterly stats that are coming in, you look at January, February, and March. In January, 108 agencies reported that we had the zero trained. And then it's gotten, again, a little bit better, but that's still a significant amount of agencies who are saying we haven't trained anyone. And some of these agencies are quite large. So that's concerning to us. We're going to get into it in a little bit in the rest of our presentation. We want to be able to assist these agencies and have ideas that we'll discuss in the presentation about how we might be able to do that for them.
So, I mean, to Megan's point, as you can see, we are managing a large administrative duty with, very small resources with respect to only having, one training assistant. So what are some of our technology-related training goals? Like for me, it's to automate, streamline, innovate, and also increase our agency partnerships that we have right now. So as I mentioned, in the last slide, you can see that there's over 600 to 700 inquiries a month. We want to be able to streamline that, especially when it comes to having ethics officers submit their monthly aggregate statistics to us. So right now, we're in the process of working with our ITS partners and being able to develop an online application that streamlines that process, because right now the system is pretty antiquated. Our training assistant, Brianna, is managing 400 emails a month, going through those emails and then data entering, those monthly aggregate stats into a spreadsheet and then providing us with reporting information that way. We really need to be able to streamline this and innovate this. That way we can actually spend our time working on the initiatives that matter. In addition to being able to create this online application for our agency ethics officers, for our training compliance officers with respect to being able to data enter this, the application is also going to allow them to be able to do reporting, allow us to be able to do reporting. So instead of spending, days and weeks combing through spreadsheets, we'll be able to run the same information through a click of a button. In addition to that, we've also been preparing for our new trainers. So as we had stated, we're hoping to be able to have 3 trainers in-house, and we want them to be able to obviously train, hopefully once a day, twice a day. We'll see what that turns out to look like, but we need to be able to set up infrastructure here now to be able to accommodate that. Because currently, for a state employee to be able to take one of our open training sessions, they go to our website, they fill out a training enrollment form. That information is then emailed to our training assistant, and once again, it's kind of like an archaic way of being able to do it, where you're taking the information from that email and then you're data entering it into a spreadsheet. And there's a lot of back and forth that goes along with that. So, if the employee ends up having to change, their original date, you have even more administrative back and forth. And we want to be able to take that function out of the hands of the training assistant and then be able to automate that to give employees more control of the training schedule, so that if they need to change the date in which that they want to enroll and take one of our open session trainings, they can manage that themselves. And if the class, let's say, is closed out, they would be able to receive an error message and say, unfortunately, that that particular session is at class capacity. Please choose another session. So this is what we mean when we're talking about automating and streamlining some of those day-to-day processes, so we can again take more time and being able to handle the initiatives, that take more precedence. So some application updates in addition to what I just mentioned before. Now, for the comprehensive system, the biggest challenge for us is actually identifying those 300,000 state employees. And the way that we're doing that is through agency partnerships, by going into what we're considering these data sharing agreements. Now, Megan's pretty much spearheaded that initiative on her own. We actually just finalized a data sharing agreement between ourselves and the Office of the State Comptroller in order to be able to gather their employee roster. So we wanted to give you some awareness as to what information we are capturing, because not every single state employee, unfortunately, falls under that OSC roster. To give you some perspective, a lot of the larger authorities are not under the OSC umbrella. So let's take the largest that we can identify for you, the MTA, the Metropolitan Transit Authority. They themselves have their own system of managing their own employee data, and they have over 70,000 employees under their umbrella. So we believe that the data that we are requesting is the most consistent data that we would probably be able to get amongst all of our partner agencies, because a huge challenge for us is being able to take data that is being utilized in other different systems and be able to kind of import it into one system. So for our data sharing agreements, what we're asking our partner agencies for is just for the agency code. That's just a numeric identification so that we know exactly what agency that is, the agency name, the employee ID. Again, this is critical for us to be able to have an employee identifying information so that if an employee, let's say, goes from COLAG to the Department of Health to transportation, those training records would seamlessly be able to follow the employee. employee name, employee email address. Obviously, that's critical for us to be able to provide them with information regarding the training requirement, when they're required to complete training, training reminders, training enrollment information, overdue training notices, as well as the status code. So in our work with our partner agencies, we're asking those agencies to only provide us with the employees who are actively on their payroll. So those employees are actually required to take training, and not those that may have already left state service. So what are some of our data limitations? As I kind of glazed upon, approximately 57 out of 385 agencies are outside the OSC payroll. So that presents a major challenge for Megan in the sense that she has to go one-on-one, with these specific partner agencies and then develop customized data sharing agreements between them. And she's already done a lot of outreach with respect to that. As I mentioned, we did accomplish the OSC, which is the largest employee roster that we could get our hands on. And now we're working on being able to try to accomplish those same goals with the MTA. Standardization of data points. That's a major data limitation because, other agencies might be tracking information differently. Some track new hires, some do not. Some track whether or not they're an FDS filer or if they're a policymaker or things of that nature. Others do not. So we need to be able to kind of take a broad approach when it comes to data and say, what are the most consistent data points that we believe that everyone would be tracking with respect to their employees? And that's why we've kind of limited to those data points that I had talked about briefly. A major challenge for us as well is being able to segment the state workforce into live training. The mandate really requires that over 300,000 people receive, live training, but we want to be able to kind of segment that workforce so that we have 150,000 one year and then 150,000 the preceding year. And, we can say that that's feasible, but when it comes to actually application development and design, we're going to also be looking for, the committee in order to be able to kind of weigh in on this, be able to give us guidance as to how you imagine, that happening. Is that happening? Let's say we have an agency that has over 5,000 employees. Are we saying that for year one, that employees whose last name ends between A and L, are they on one cycle? And then the employees that ends on, M through Z are on a different cycle. So, that's just kind of like a high level overview of that. But, we can get into that more in subsequent meetings. So I'm sorry, does anyone have a question?
Just a quick question before we go on. I was not clear, maybe because I'm drifting in and out of time zones, but just on the previous slide, standardization of data points under data limitations. And this was data points on employees or data?
Correct. So what we're trying to, for us, the challenge is we have over nearly 400 different agencies, and out of those 400 agencies, there are 57 different agencies that are using different software to be able to track their employees. And what do we imagine here at COLIG is the standard level of data that, let's say that each one of those specific HR platforms are going to capture. And that's why we've identified the agency code, the agency name, just basic high level, information related to the employee.
Thank you. I understand. Thank you.
So in our business rule development, we also have to be able to express what are our application requirements. What are we hoping this comprehensive system is going to be able to do for us here at COLIG, in addition to being able to help our partner agencies meet this incredibly large mandate. So part of the application requirements is to manage and refresh the employee roster database. So that means that, OSC, let's say, is going to be able to provide us with the names of, let's say, 150,000 employees as an example. Well, that's stagnant data. So we need to be able to also create pathways between ourselves, our new application, and these existing agencies to be able to refresh that data. Because we have to assume that employees are going to be leaving, they're going to to be retiring, leaving state service for numerous reasons. In addition to that, the state will also be hiring new employees. So anytime we refresh that data, at that point in time, we would be able to say, okay, this is a new hire, and this person needs to be trained within 90 days, as an example. So that's an example of what we mean by refreshing that employee roster data. The system needs to be able to assign due dates to new hires, and existing employees. I mean, we'll get to this a little bit later, but Executive Law 94 gives us a clear indication as to when new hires need to be trained. It says new hires need to be trained within 90 days. It's an easy line in the sand for us. Unfortunately, it did not do the same when it came to existing employees that have already been within state service. So that's something, again, that, we're going in order to be able to need the committee's guidance on. We want the system to be able to provide, system-generated notifications for things that I mentioned before, training reminders, overdue notices, enrollment information, and certifications and certificates. We want to be able to have that all automated. Remove the administrative burden from both the agency ethics officer and from us here internally at COLEG. The system needs to be able to handle training waivers and extensions. If someone needs to go on medical leave, they need to be able to submit, a waiver from us or an extension of time. The ability to track and enter training completion data. So that's very simple. I took the training on this date. I put the date in, and then it automatically refreshes that date and tells me when I'm due to take training again, and obviously reporting functions. That way we internally here at COLEG can identify, like we're doing right now, manually through a spreadsheet and say, okay, in January, as Megan mentioned, there was 108 agencies that reported zero training. What can we do here internally to help those partner agencies who may be struggling and may not have the staff or the resources to be able to train their own people? And that's the type of reporting information that for us would be incredibly valuable so that we can identify and provide targeted outreach depending on the agency need.
Okay. So let's talk about more solutions and what we also want your sign off and guidance on. So the first thing we'll talk about is a comprehensive, flexible, what we're going to call the on-demand CETC. And so we plan to develop this soon and have this be able to be taken by the majority of the state workforce who are not FDS filers, who've never had to take ethics training before. We're going to do a proposed training schedule in a minute. But what we need for this on-demand CETC is it needs to be what's called, and Marlena knows more about this, but SCORM compliant, right? And SCORM compliant simply means the online training package can be uploaded into any learning management system that is also SCORM compliant. So one of the systems that we're going to hopefully be able to talk to is the state SLMS. And we're going to develop this on-demand CETC online and have it be put into SLMS so certain people in the state workforce can take it. We hope to make this online training available pretty soon. Now, this will lead us to the next slide here. I know you all are going to have lots of questions on this after, but I'll go through this now. This is the proposed training schedule that we've think is going to make most sense to all the different populations of state employees right now. So new employees, the statute requires that they get the CETC within 90 days. We know from the information we're getting from ethics officers that that is not necessarily happening yet, right? So not everyone is getting into necessarily a live training. What we'll suggest is once we get this on-demand CETC up, that new employees who are coming on now get this within the first 90 days. They can always take the live CETC first. But if they take that on-demand CETC within the first 90 days, we're going to suggest that they get into a live CETC by December 31st of next year. This on-demand CETC is going to pretty much have all that same information. It's just going to be online, so they're going to be getting it in that format. And then their ethics refresher would be the next year. All right. So the next category is existing FDS filers who have completed a live CETC in either 2022 or 2023 this year. We don't have the ethics refresher course yet. So we are suggesting that this on-demand CETC qualify for their refresher training. And let's see, do we have a date in there? I think in our guidance document, I think we're asking, there it is. If a live CETC is taken in 2022, this refresher, this on-demand CETC, needs to be taken by the end of this year. So if they've taken live training, and sometime in 2022, they need to take their refresher training by the end of this year. If they've taken a live CETC sometime this year, then they should take this refresher by the end of next year. Now, finally, this is the group that the majority of the state workforce is going to fall into. Existing FDS filers who may have never taken ethics training, believe it or not, there are some FDS people in our system that have never taken it, or non-FDS employees. So
Your general workforce.
I mean, we're talking probably 270,000 people that this is where they're going to fall. We want them to complete this on-demand CETC no later than the end of this year. And then for the live CETC, we would suggest getting them in by the end of 2024, and then the schedule goes on again by 2025. Some of our ideas to accomplish this is to, of course, increase the frequency of ethics officer forums, have more train the trainers, make sure that they are getting enough people in their own agencies to get all these moving parts going. Now,
So as we mentioned, this is a critical, we believe that this is a critical piece of information that we need to be able to disseminate to our ethics officers and partner agencies immediately, because as we had mentioned previously, you know, executive law did a great job in giving us a timetable for new hires. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to answer the question with respect to what do we do about our existing state workforce. We need to be able to communicate now to ethics officers, training compliance officers, that this is our expectation, that once the on-demand CETC is launched and made available, not only into the statewide learning management system, but we also want to be able to provide it to any agency that manages their own LMS, as Megan had mentioned, like SUNY and CUNY. Like, they did do a actual survey, and they surveyed all of their partner agencies, and around nearly 24 agencies manage their own LMS. So we want to be able to create a SCORM compliant course in order to be able to accommodate and reach the largest amount of people, especially those people who are outside of the SLMS umbrella.
and also just to address something Commissioner Whittingham had said earlier, really important to get dates in so we can figure out what compliance is. If we don't assign a date to these people, we can't track compliance. Are they getting these trainings done by the dates and the times that they're supposed to do that?
And that's a critical component also when it comes to the application design. So we had to do that, just to give you a little bit of historical knowledge. We had to do that when it came to the training that we offer now for lobbyists and clients. We had, in order to be able to assign a global due date for all of those people, and then continue to move the due date. So it's critical for us in order to be able to provide due dates now for the entire state workforce.
Okay. So here's some ideas for increased co-link training opportunities. As you all know, we're excited to get more staff on here so we can actually, it's not just me doing the trainings anymore. I would love to have some folks take that off of me, and then increase the number of offerings we do. Some ideas to have agency-specific CETC trainings, because when we have these open training sessions, right now, because it's not automated yet, it's a lot of administrative work to get people enrolled in certain classes because it's not coming from one source. We envision if we do some agency-specific trainings, hopefully shift some of that burden onto the ethics officer, because they can print out a list of whoever's coming to the class from their records and sign them off if they come down to the training or not. Open agency trainings, again, we're going to hopefully ramp those up. Another idea Marlene and I have been thinking about, and we want to do, hopefully starting this summer, maybe in the fall, is rent out some space up on the Empire Plaza. They have huge meeting rooms, and maybe do a 400 to 500 person training at a time. There's so many, as most of you know, well, some of you know who are up here in Albany, thousands and thousands of employees just up the hill. So if we come to them and knock off the several hundred at one time, that would be great. And then again, increase the number of ethics officer forums, like we said, to make sure that the ethics officers have the information they need, that they are also letting us know the issues that they're having so we can address those right away. Which lends itself beautifully into the next slide, ethics officer outreach initiative. See if there's anything. We are just, Marlene had mentioned before, we really are working on outreach to agencies who are coming to us with specific issues. A couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, we had one with OMRDD and, corrections. Some of these OMH, some of these state agencies who have offices all over the state, who have 24-hour staff, who have all these issues. And so we were throwing around ideas about what they should do. OMH, I told their ethics officer, I will, sing from the rooftops about how well they're doing. They have figured out how to ramp up their training. And so their ethics officer talked a lot to those other agencies about some ideas of how to get theirs moving along as well. And so we're doing that on a pretty frequent basis. We also do check-ins with the MTA as a 70,000 person agency. They have, they have a lot of things to deal with just with the massive size of their workforce.
And we meet with the MTA monthly. Yep. on those specific, issues. So, we do offer the availability that for these larger agencies or even for the smaller agencies, if they have certain circumstances in which they feel more comfortable just talking to me and Megan one-on-one with, then, we're happy to meet with them. So what are some of our, I'm sorry, does someone have a question?
How much more time do you need? Because we had agreed to end by about 3.
I can wrap this up in 3 minutes. So some of our live training challenges are those agencies that have seasonal and temporary employees, especially those employees who are on the payroll for less than 90 days. Megan, obviously she's our Deputy Director of Education. She's also an attorney. She's received a lot of requests from these agencies who are asking for us for waivers specifically with respect to the training requirement. Are these folks who are on the payroll for less than 90 days who may never re-enter state service again, are these folks required, to be trained, especially in situations in which a lot of these employees do not have access to a work computer? They, do not work in a traditional, office work setting. Some of them don't even have smartphones. Some of them actually have flip phones. We had an agency come to us and tell us that, out of their large number of employees, that they are missing, they only have 30,000 email addresses, and they're in the process of trying to get, let's say, 40, 50, 60,000 other email addresses. And the only way that they're able to communicate with their employees, is through traditional mail, is through the post office. So, we do have agencies that have significant training challenges, and they're coming to us now rather frequently asking us for guidance in the sense of, do we have to train these folks, let's say, and if we do train these folks, what are some options that we can do? Me and Megan have been stressing that when it comes to onboarding their seasonal and temporary employees, that would be the opportunity where they kind of present like what I'm considering like an ethics express. But sometimes that's not, that's not possible for some of these agencies, especially those who work on non-traditional working hours and have large, agreements, and they have to get unions involved and things of that nature. So some of the requests to modify live training requirements, as I mentioned, these are some of the requests that we're getting right now. So some people would like to have pre-recorded training sessions. So they'll record their trainer presenting the CETC, have the audience view it, and then someone from the agency, whether it's an ethics officer or a trainer, would kind of act as a live moderator. They've also asked for alternate course delivery and certification options. So they're asking for us to be able to provide trainings and, a CD or some type of USB file and be able to allow us to accept, let's say, paper attestations, which again, that would create a significant burden for us when it comes to the paper attestation. So just something to keep in mind. They want to be able to provide video and print CETC versions and move away from the live training wherever possible. And also do, as I mentioned, PDF training attestations. So these are the types of situations in which that we are being asked, and these are the types of situations that you folks are going to have to be able to weigh in on and develop some type of criteria if you decide that you may entertain any of these options and decide, okay, well, this may be acceptable, but you have to meet the specific criteria in order for us to be able to allow you to take the CETC, let's say, in this alternate format.
I'm going to try to hold up right about here, because I want to take more time at the next meeting to talk about your SWOT analysis, which I don't want to rush through. And I want to just spend a few minutes trying to get insight into how this feeds into our charter and our goals.
Yeah,
And so I'd like to kind of end the presentation at this point so we can just kind of close out and bring all this together in one piece. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation.
good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very comprehensive and thorough. And the short answer is, in terms of short-term goals, this is exactly the timetable that's presented in what Elena and Megan have shown us. Exactly corresponds to the short-term goals that we've established. The goal is to have the entire contingent of state workers for whom we're responsible to provide ethics training receive some form of ethics training by the end of this calendar year. It's a very ambitious goal. Lots of methodologies we're going to have to be using in order to achieve that. We're on track to accomplish that. It's not all going to be live. Some of it's going to be a combination of live. It's going to be, I think, predominantly at the end of the day, or at least the majority of the training will be some form of online training that we can provide. It's going to be a huge challenge to monitor it, get the data in. We may not get all the data in the calendar year, as it drifts in. We do have ITS working very aggressively to build systems with their limitations. We've sequestered money to pay for a consultant. Excuse me. They've run into difficulties for internal reasons. Well, in getting the necessary internal approvals because of things that ITS is currently experiencing. It's not our fault. But we've been assured that ITS have assigned other individuals to work on. We have a new project manager. That's the switch in project managers probably pushed us back a little bit. We're moving forward on that.
Just a minute, Doug, do you have a question?
Just on the, actually, why don't you finish it and I'll come back.
Yeah, I mean, we want to make sure live training is available to everyone by the end of next year. And by the end of 2025, that we have everybody in the 2-year cycle. So we've got a 2-year rotating cycle. 1 year of live.
300,000 people.
Yeah, well, but this is how we do it. It's still daunting. It's 150,000 people in year A, we'll call it, will be receiving live. And half will be receiving online. Once we hit that mark, the following year they'll reverse places. Because they don't need live every year. They don't need online every year. It's alternating.
So in 3 years, you're saying you want to hit 300,000 in 2023,
No,
26?
I'm going to hit 300,000 this year in some form of training,
Whether it's live or
whether it's live or online. And next year we'll flip them
the
over.
other half.
And then by 2025, so 2023, 24, by 2025, we'd like to be able to establish a cycle where half the workforce is on live and half is online. And then the following year, they switch places. So you don't need a training capability to deliver 300,000 live trainings a year. It's 150,000.
That's consistent with the law.
And that's consistent with the law. Well, as Martina and Megan had pointed out, the law talks about 90 days of hire. It doesn't say what you do with all the other people we have. So we will be achieving for the workforce the full requirement of the law. It's still, wildly ambitious. Because, I mean, the life component is the hard part in terms of delivering. We have things we're thinking about, like a concentrated center to provide training.
You mentioned that over the phone. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's aspirational. It's not, it's something we would have to create in partnership with other agencies.
An off-site
We would
training
create
center.
a separate training facility, a dedicated
other
training
agencies-
facility that would be providing online live training.
That's great. Would other agencies be able to come in and
That
participate?
would, that would be the point
That'd
of
be a
it.
great idea.
That would be the point of it. But, we have to scope out the cost of it. It's unprecedented, and how well it would work across agencies, and how it would be funded.
And where
It takes some of
would you
the,
place it, upstate or down here?
it would, wherever it's most cost effective. But, you would want to have it in a place where you have individuals who are available to be trained as trainers, to work in the facility, and they would be dedicated trainers. And we'll be establishing the model as we expand the training group. As Marlena was talking about, having individuals who will be dedicated to training. They won't have the additional administrative that our trainers historically have had.
So quick question on, there was a group of folks, I think it said FDS filers who've not had the training. Did I see that in their presentation?
I don't think it's that many. I can look that up, but you can look at the FES system and there was a historical date as to when the bulk of the information went in. And maybe it's a couple hundred, but there are some folks who just have completely ignored every overdue notice that they've gotten within the last 6 years from us. So I don't think it's a ton, but there are a few people.
There are new people in the system who haven't
Right.
yet had
Right.
the training.
Well, my question was going to be how you identify them, but you can identify them, so that's good.
Mm-hmm.
But it also begs the question, and there's probably some labor union issues here. It should not be the case that someone can just ignore
Right.
a training requirement
What's the
without
consequences for not
consequences.
doing it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what those would be, but to have people go years and years and years and years and work for the state and simply ignore the training requirement, that seems like there's a serious flaw in the system.
Well, that has been something that has been the subject of talked about legislative proposals. Where it fits in the scheme of priorities. It's true in lobbying training. There's no, as at least one commentator has pointed out,
Yeah.
there's no statutory penalty for not registering your certification, and the same is true on the training side. But
Should we be advocating for that?
Maybe agencies put their names on the front page of their websites.
People who haven't.
well,
Talk about training.
Yeah,
we
No, I know you can't.
the presentation alluded to the fact that we have a reporting requirement as an agency. We have to report compliance or not on a quarterly basis with both the lobbying and the ethics training report. We have to file an annual legislature. We have been doing our quarterly reports based on aggregate data. When it comes to the annual report, we will be doing it an agency by agency basis. We need to get the data in on the size of the workforces and match people up. That's a big challenge, and that's why we need these MOUs with various agencies to get the basic employee information in.
back to these people who just ignore the requirement, don't we list delinquent filers who are some
Yeah.
form of
Yes, we do. We do.
Where is it,
That's all right.
where is it posted?
It's posted on our website. We have a dedicated area on our website and we post the names. And then we also, once they do file, we also post when they actually file the FDS form.
Not for training, for FTS.
FDS, well, there's a system. They have to get a notification first. There's in theory a 15-day compliance period,
But
and then they're called out.
to Commissioner Ayers' suggestion that we post them on the agency website, on the a particular agency website, and we post a list of people who are delinquent in their training requirements on just our website as kind of a first step.
Something we have to look at.
Okay?
Just what about penalties, like if there's going to be a transfer of employee going from one division to another or a promotion, that be held up until they do their training?
No, now you gotta,
I can see that, I think
Yeah.
some of these are things that the legislature has to look at.
but Marlena mentioned this thing, the Ethics Express training. What was that about?
So that's more leaning towards, what we may want to be able to offer, especially those seasonal employees or those employees that perhaps meet a certain criteria. Because as I mentioned before, not employees have access to work computers, work email addresses.
Here's another question. As part of every agency, when you have a new employee, that there's going to be some kind of an orientation program. And I've worked with a lot of agencies, got oriented a lot of the time. I'm trying to think though,
Job, take test.
is, could we put together something like the highlights of the key points to your obligations, your ethical obligations under the laws we administer? Not a lot, but it's just there. Be aware that you can't, you're not, in a simplified format that becomes part of the orientation package for every new.
Commissioner, we have a lot of different educational materials. A couple years ago, and we could actually mention this in another ethics forum that hopefully we'll do another one for everyone soon, but a few years ago, we came up with a 2-pager. Here are the main things going through the public officers law, and we suggested this is a great place to put it into your onboarding information. So we can't force ethics officers to put it in there, but we've always suggested, put something in there from us so they have an idea of what's going on the first day they start. I know when we become state employees, we certify that we've read the public officers law. That's like, we want them to have that information right away in a easy to read, plain language format. Thank you.
An ethics test card. We do now have the 90 days of hire. We had 90 days. Yes, fine. So we have a pretty quick training requirement once it's implemented across the.
And thank you. I have just one last question from Aber, then we're going to close the meeting out.
Thanks. So my question is just, the challenges you're describing are extremely daunting, and we've heard about the 300,000 number a lot, and understandably, because it sounds terrifying. But I also think it's important that your presentation focused mostly on the process that we're required to go through and all of the immense logistical challenges in making that process a reality. I guess my question is, what about the content? That is what's going into the training? Because the mandate is to make sure everybody has a training or at the right frequency, but the goal is to make sure that people understand the ethics requirements. Absolutely. And most trainings that I've taken don't succeed, to say the least, in helping me produce the understanding that I'm supposed to. And so I guess one of my questions is on that side of things, in terms of the content that's going into these trainings as opposed to the process, do we have, for example, testers who are not knowledgeable, but who take the training and then we quiz them to see, did the training work? Did they have the knowledge, assuming they weren't playing on their phones the whole time? Do we have outside folks reviewing the trainings? Do we look at other trainings? Duolingo seems to work a lot better than my kid's Spanish class because it's gamified, and apparently that works better than a passive training model. Who's thinking about how do we know how we're doing and whether we're getting better year to year whether the trainings are doing, or whether we're more successful this year than we were last year at having people who take these trainings successfully later regurgitate some actual ethics rule.
We used to say that no one who had taken the agencies, talking about prior agencies, ethics course, who had actually taken it from the agency as opposed to in the field had ever had a violation. But, you know, it's an interesting statistic, right, as an approach. Now, we have looked at other training modalities. We have looked at other ethics training demonstrations and programs and training programs. We hire professional trainers. I'll defer to Megan and Marlena on testing on human subjects.
Yeah.
Because I guess, I don't know if you can use an animal model. I think maybe you can. Or maybe now with some of the new technologies that are out there, so there's a way to test it, and maybe that's the way to design the programs. But that's part of our mandate. That's absolutely part of our mandate, and looking at other modalities for affirming, confirming, verifying that our trainings are effective. Really an important
Go back
thing
to the
for us to
question you
do.
discussed earlier about state-of-the-arts program.
Yeah, and metrics. How do you measure the success and the efficacy of?
Yeah, I guess my question is, how do we assess the success of our content as opposed to how many people it's reaching?
Yeah, and should we have a test? Should we have a testing module?
We'll need to
Yeah.
have it.
At the end of it, I know my physicians took an automated training program that actually had testing protocols built into it, and you couldn't go from section A to section B or 2.
Yeah, oh no, I mean, and we have those all the time for the trainings that we use for our HR stuff and employment discrimination, but like,
Yeah.
I'm saying, do we like hire a couple of college students to take an hour, take the training and then quiz them and see if it worked?
We can do that.
I think it'd be really informative.
Yeah, but then I like the idea of eventually getting to this automated testing that happens at the end of the training as they do in HR cases. I mean, because I'm pretty sure for both the city feds and nonprofit sexual harassment training that I've taken, at the end of each of those 3 courses, there was a
Yeah.
So if we could eventually get to where we have that at the end of our ethics training or ethics and lobbying.
Yeah, we're trying to design the SLMS module, so we'll have various kinds of things built in, whether it'll be that sophisticated, the first
Maybe
thing.
get a certificate.
Oh, yeah, no,
But as you said, we've got this now.
Yeah.
How much you're.
Yeah, no, it's gotta roll.
Carry up with us, it's gonna be an interesting question.
Are there any other questions before we close this meeting? There are none. Then I'd like to do a motion to adjourn. Like to could someone please motion to adjourn the meeting? And a second?
Second.
Okay, we will be going offline in 1 moment.
Okay.